is a creepy and curious world out there, and this morning we find out about some of the creatures that hold some pretty interesting secrets, unassuming parasites with an interesting story to tell. Dr. Tommy Long from the University of New England is with us. Hey, Tommy.
Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning to you. How's Armidale looking? Nice and warm already this morning?
Yeah, it's a lot warmer than it's been for a few weeks ago. So, but knowing weather around Armidale, I wouldn't kind of.
Not going to take the flanny sheets off the bed yet?
No, not yet. It catch you out, so.
So what are we talking about this morning?
Well, today I'm actually going to be talking about some freshwater mussels as well as a little fish called bitterling. But the reason I'm talking about them is because they are actually parasites at a certain stage of their life. You wouldn't think just by looking at them. Those freshwater mussels, they just look like normal shells that live in a stream, and these little fish just look like, I guess, tiny version of carp. But they're actually parasites for the first stage of their lives.
Okay, so let's start with a bit of a description. What do they look like so we can start to imagine the story as you tell us?
Well, I'm going to start by talking about the mussels first. So the mussels belong to this family called a Unionidae family, and they look kind of like the mussels they might eat, except that these guys are freshwater, and often they grow a lot larger. They can grow up to like 30 centimeters, and some of them are larger. They're found over the world, but the most diverse fauna are found in North America. So in North America, there are about 300 or so species. There are 29 species that are found in Australia, and some of them can actually have quite long lifespans. So the lifespan of some species are between 10 to 15 years, but others can live for at least about 70 to 80s, and some have been recorded to be over 100 years old. So these are very long-lived mollusks.
Yeah, okay. And the other creature?
Well, the other creature I'm going to be talking about are bitterlings, and bitterlings are these little fish which belongs to this genus called Rhodeus, which is actually derived from the Greek for rose. And they belong to the cyprinid family, which the carp and such also belongs to. And there are about 22 species, and most of them are found in Asia, but there are 2 species that are found in Europe. And they also have a very unusual habit for the first stage of their lives as well.
Okay. So where do we start? Where do you want to start telling us about how they come to know each other?
Well, I'll start by talking a little bit about the mussels first. So these mussels they live in fast-flowing streams. They like clean flowing water, usually like a clean river or stream. And so the way that they reproduce now, the way that most bivalve reproduce is that the females and the males just eject the eggs and the sperm into the water, and they just, set them free and let them do their thing. They don't really do much with them. But in the case of these particular mussels, the males actually eject the sperms, which then get sucked up by the females. And the females actually keep the eggs inside the gills and develop them into a little larval stage called a glochidia. And the glochidia, they look kind of like little Pac-Mans. If anyone, I'm sure most people, even young people, would know like what Pac-Man is. It's like a cultural icon, but they look like tiny little Pac-Man that are less than 1 millimeter long, and they have like a little hook at the end of the shell. So imagine if like Pac-Man turned into a vampire or something like that. So you got these little vampire Pac-Man things. And what they do is that they actually have to cling on to a fish's gills or fins to develop into a juvenile mussels. So they actually spend the first stage of their lives as parasites.
Wow, that's how they begin.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
And what's their growth like after that?
Well, after that, it takes about a few weeks to a few months for them to grow into juvenile mussels, and then they just drop off from the fish and bury themselves into the stream bed, and then proceed to grow over the next several decades into a full-grown adult. But for the first stage of their lives, they have to parasitize themselves onto fish. And the mussels, like the adult mussels, actually have certain adaptations to make sure that that's more likely to happen.
So how does something as immobile as a mussel make a fish a willing incubator, if you will?
Well, some of these mussels actually have some really interesting contraptions growing out of their body. So, for example, there's some called the pocketbook mussels, which actually have a little... So when you look at the mussels, sometimes you'll see they have this mantle fringe, that kind of fringy, frilly area near the edge of the shell. In some of these species, that fringy, frilly area has actually evolved to kind of resemble a little fish. So there's like a little bit that sticks out, and there's a bit that looks like a fin, and there's a pigmented spot that looks like an eye, and they just kind of wave it in the water, so it looks like a little fish undulating along. And then a bigger fish, or maybe a fish that thinking it's found a friend, would come along, and then they would just get sprayed with a little vampire Pac-Man that grab onto them.
So the fish, are they conscious of what's going on? Are they aware of it?
Well, yeah, obviously after you get like all these little things grabbing onto you, yeah, they would be very, very conscious and they would move away. But, after that, the deal's done. In fact, some species of these mussels have actually evolved a different kind of contraption. They have evolved to extrude this thing called superconglutinate, which is this kind of slime trail, but the slime trail is very, very viscous, and it's especially shaped so that you can almost compare it to like one of those soft plastic lures that fishermen use. So it's like this little blob like thing that sort of resembles a worm or fish. It has a little pigmented spot that looks like it has an eye, and these mussels actually go fishing. So it trails out this little fishing lure, which is actually filled with the little mussel larvae. And then the fish bites onto them. And then, of course, it gets a mouthful of these little vampire Pac-Man that grabs onto the gills.
Yuck. Okay, so the mussel's going fishing there.
Yeah.
Is what the story is here. In this interesting situation, what's the life like for the fish then with these weird things hooked into it?
It would just be like if you got like ticks and mites, or maybe like fleas. They have things like they just kind of they are ectoparasites basically. They do what fleas might do to you. So I guess it'll be in the same situation.
Okay, so describe the fish to us, or what's it like?
Well, it depends on the kind of fish, because they do infect a variety of fish depending on what species of mussels you're talking about. Usually what happens is that the fish would grow some kind of immune reaction. So the Glochidia larva, the little mussel larva, would actually get encapsulated, but it doesn't really affect it. In fact, it actually gives us some kind of benefit because it's enclosed now. And as soon as the mussels grow big enough, they just kind of pop out of that little pocket and drop off back into the stream bed.
Okay, so the fish, in the end, don't worry, doesn't stop it.
It doesn't kill them or anything. It's just like I said, if you were to get fleas or ticks or bed bugs or whatever, it's very, very annoying, and it might be slightly harmful, but it's not going to kill them.
Okay, and what's the chances of are there any predators for the mussels when they pop out?
Well, once they grow big enough, not really, but I guess there are like other fish and other animals like, little turtles and stuff like that might try to eat the mussels. But once they grow big enough, they're kind of invulnerable. So that's why they, that's why they can live for so long. Yeah. And also usually the success rate of the little larva clamping onto the fish isn't really all that high. I think it's been estimated for some species it's like about 5%. But when you live for like 70 or 80 or even over 100 years, you get many chance to reproduce. So for these mussels, they like the important thing for them is to have clean flowing water, as well as fish, the appropriate species of fish around for them to infect.
So where do we find these guys mostly?
Oh, they're found all over the world, and they're found in mostly fast-flowing streams. So there are a few species in Australia, 29 species, but North America is where most of the diversity of these guys are at, and they're actually kind of under threat because of habitat destruction. Because people catch them to get pearls and out of them and use the shell, but also because sometimes their hosts might get extirpated from an environment. So in some cases, like most people might not consider this, but if you lose the fish from a stream, you might also end up losing the mussel, even though I guess most people might not see that there is actually a connection between those two things.
Yeah. I mean, how dependent are the fish and the mussel on each other?
Well, in the case of the mussels are like
completely
completely dependent. They go through that parasitic stage and they can't complete their life cycle without it. The fish not so much, except this one other species of fish I want to talk about, which is the bitterling. And the bitterlings they belong to fish that are considered so-called ostracophils, which are fish that lays the eggs inside the body of invertebrate animals.
Oh, okay. That sounds very disturbing. How does that all work?
Well, these fish actually lay the eggs inside mussels, much like the unionid mussels that I just talked about. And they are little fish. They're about 10 centimeters long. They can like literally just fit onto your hand, and they're found in mostly freshwater habitat. And they're very restricted in the distribution because they're so dependent upon the mussels, just like those mussels are dependent upon other species of fish as well. And the thing that makes these particular fish special, apart from the fact that they lay eggs inside invertebrate animals, that's already pretty special enough. The female fish actually have this very long ovipositor. So whereas other fish, they just have a little hole called cloaca, and then eggs pop out of them. The bitterling fish have actually evolved to have females that have this long tube to deliver the eggs, because what she does is that when she is fertile, she actually uses that ovipositor and then sticks it into the siphon of a mussel, and then she just squirt eggs in there, and the eggs just sticks themselves onto the gills of the mussel, and then the male comes along and squirts sperm into the mussel. So for the mussel, it must be just like a terrible
Very,
day.
very pleasant. Yeah.
No, you have some fish sticking their tube down your siphon, which is the equivalent of, I guess, their nose or their mouth, and then another fish comes along and squirts sperm in it. So
Yeah, not a day to look forward to, I
no.
imagine. No. And I guess so, then do they provide this protected environment then for the little eggs to grow up in?
Yeah, pretty much. The mussels, when you think about it, is actually the perfect place, the perfect incubator for little larval fish, because the mussels are basically living filter pumps. They pump in water to extract oxygen and nutrients and then pump it back out. So there's a constant flow of fresh, oxygenated, nutrient-rich water, and that's what the eggs use to develop, and that's what the larvae depend upon for the first 3 to 4 weeks of their lives, until they grow big enough that they just swim out the mussel. So it's kind of like a interesting mirror image or parallel with the mussels and the bitterlings, that they do almost kind of the same thing to the host.
Yeah, exactly the opposite. How do the mussels know when to release the little fishlings, and when
They like the mussel don't know. The fishlings don't know. They themselves know. Like the fry knows when to leave. Like the mussels, they rather not, because they are parasites. The mussel would rather not have those guys around. And in fact, you would think that it's kind of difficult to hang on inside a mussel, seeing how it's a water pump, so this constant flow of water. But these larvae has like certain adaptations that allow them to live in the mussel. So they have, some species have like little spines that allow them to lodge in there really well between the gills. Some of them actually have these strange protrusions that look like miniature wings, like little stubby wings that allow them to just lodge themselves in there. And if the mussels close themselves, these larval fish can actually tolerate periods of anoxia. So if there's no oxygen, they can withstand that for a little while until the mussel have to open up again.
Wow. So what do we learn from both of these two very, well, I'd say quite creepy,
Quite curious,
quite
I would
curious,
say.
okay,
Yeah.
bits of science. Yeah.
Well, those two animals are like rather dependent upon each other in two different ways. So, for example, the bitterlings themselves, because they hang out around mussels a lot, especially these mussels that sometimes squirt those little, Pac-Man larvae at them, they've actually evolved to be especially resistant to the mussels, unlike other fish. So other fish are very susceptible to these mussel larvae, whereas bitterlings, any attempt at infecting them are usually resisted. So this is a very good example of coevolution between these animals, but it also shows the interconnectedness of a lot of these animals in the environment. The bitterling depends upon these mussels, and the mussels themselves depends on other fish to infect to complete the life cycle. And it shows that if you start removing certain species from the environment, you might have like these cascading flow-on effect that you don't know what's going to happen. If people didn't know about how these mussels live, they just think that, if like not having fish around would not affect the mussels, but very much not the case.
Yeah, it's just incredible, isn't it, when you think about the flow-on effects when one species is affected and what it actually might do.
Hmm.
Oh, Tommy, you've done it again. I think you've got both ends of the spectrum. Another great cartoon too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll pop that up online a little bit later today. But Tommy, thanks for catching you next time.
Thanks, Kelly.
Cheers, Dr. Tommy Lung from UNE. Creepy but curious this morning.